May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and while mental health issues have become a more open conversation in the last decade, they still often take a backseat to physical health. That's especially true when it comes to pregnant and new mothers. And with all eyes on the baby, it's easy to miss if a mom is struggling. The National Alliance on Mental Illness estimates 1 out of every 5 women have been affected by anxiety or depression while pregnant or postpartum, but only about 10% of pregnant women will seek treatment. For the baby, this could mean premature birth, issues with sleeping and feeding, and even cognitive deficits. But for moms, it can increase the risk of substance abuse and even suicide. The Hill recently hosted a very important event, Moms Matter, closing the maternal mental health gap, where we spoke with moms who had been personally impacted by these struggles. Let's take a look.
My sister died by maternal suicide. Had we known the signs and symptoms and the risk factors, and she had the right help at the right time, I really feel like she would still be here with us today.
Struggling as a mom has been normalized. Instead of integrating social supports and making things a little bit easier, we say, it's hard, you'll deal with it and get over it.
I think there is a lot of stigma, but I think more importantly, there is not a whole lot of care. I think it's something that is medicalized. I think it's something that leaves women on their own without the support system.
I think the biggest stigma is that, that they're a bad mom. I wish moms knew that by getting help, you are a wonderful mom.
Joining us now from the Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance, Adrienne Griffin, and from Postpartum Support Virginia, Kamisha Battle-Jackson. Adrienne and Kamisha, thank you so much for joining us today. Adrienne, I want to start with you. As we said, in our introduction, 1 in 5 women experience some sort of mental illness during or after their pregnancy. Why is the rate of treatment so low? Do you think this is medical mistreatment or medical distress, or really the stigma surrounding mental health?
Well, that's a really great question. And as you might imagine, the answer is multifactorial and complicated. Some women may not realize that something is wrong, especially if it's your first pregnancy. You might just think that being exhausted and overwhelmed is what it's like to be a new mother, not necessarily knowing that perhaps you're experiencing depression as well. Some women don't know how to reach out for help. It's really challenging to say as a new mother or as during pregnancy, if this has been a pregnancy that was hoped for, that, hey, I'm not doing very well. And there are providers who don't know what to do. And so I think it's a combination of many factors.
Kamisha, you went through some of this as a mother yourself. Talk about what it looks like and what pregnant and new moms and their support systems should really look out for.
Sure, yes. So the thing that's really important is that depression and anxiety look different for everyone. I know for me, it was rage. I remember crying every day for the first 3 months of my son's life. I remember feeling and looking just out of it. Just going through the motions, right? Diaper change, feed, sleep. Diaper change, feed, sleep, and not really enjoying it. And this new life that I created. I remember feeling like, oh no, what have we done? Because my life just changed. It just shifted. And it was no longer my life. It was like, I'm doing this thing and I'm caring for someone else. And who am I and where do I fit in this? And so I know that the baby blues is a term that gets kind of put out there. But if it lasts longer than that first 2 weeks, then you really want to say something as a mommy, as a new mommy, second time around, as a pregnant person. If you're feeling just like you can't connect to your pregnancy, or you feel like you can't really enjoy your pregnancy because maybe you're sick or you're having complications or what have you, I would say speak up and say something for sure.
So Adrienne, we've talked with, Kamisha brought this up, speaking up, letting your, feelings, opinions, your gut instinct be heard. But what's the best way moms and their allies, because, their partners are also going through this maybe in a different way, but they're still going through it. How can they advocate for themselves and hold healthcare workers accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. In an ideal setting, our healthcare system would be talking about mental health conditions from the moment a woman is pregnant, right? And say, hey, anxiety and depression are the most common complications of pregnancy and childbirth. We're going to check in with you every time we see you. We know that pregnant and postpartum people are actively engaged in the healthcare system. They see their provider once a month, then once every 2 weeks, then once a week, and then the baby is born, and then you see the pediatrician once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and every month. Right. So there's ample opportunity for our healthcare providers to talk about mental health. And I would just suggest that if your healthcare provider doesn't bring it up, that you as the pregnant person or the new parent could say, hey, I've heard this. I just watched this production by The Hill, and I've heard that mental health conditions are very common. Let's talk about it. And I just want to echo something that Kamisha said earlier. It's not just postpartum depression. That's the term that we hear most often. Postpartum meaning after the baby is born, and depression, obviously sadness. But the majority of cases of postpartum depression actually start during pregnancy. And so that's why it's super important that obstetric providers are on top of this from the beginning. And in many cases, it's anxiety and not depression. And so it's a much broader spectrum of issues. And so what we just say to new parents, to pregnant and postpartum parents, if you're not feeling like yourself, if you're like, what's going on here, then go ahead and ask for help, reach out to help. And there's lots of resources that are available.
So we've started this discussion talking about new moms and their partners in general, but quite frankly, this issue disproportionately affects moms of color. March of Dimes advocate Stacey Brayboy had this to say on the stigma that Black women face at the Hills event earlier this month. Let's take a listen to that.
The stigmas that face the African American woman in the community, they truly do exist. How do I get help? Where do I go? Many times it's because you're not educated on where to turn to, or you don't feel comfortable talking to your provider.
Kamisha, as a Black mother, did you experience that stigma? And I have to say, I brought up that you were pregnant during the height of the pandemic, but we remember in 2020, the US and much of the world had this reckoning on race that really impacted how so many of us view race, in our culture, in society, in healthcare, mental health care. So what was your experience during that time? And what has your experience been like going forward?
Oh, sure. Thank you for asking that and bringing that to light. The one thing that I like that Ms. Brayboy mentioned is the stigma, and that our experience, it can be different. The one thing that I've experienced in talking to providers is I come well informed. So to be clear, I'm educated. I have 2 degrees. I'm married. I have come from a history of strong Black women. And so when I came to my visits, I came informed, right? And a lot of times it was met almost with resistance. Like, well, how'd you know that? Or where'd you get that from? And so I just want to say to other mamas, it's okay to do your research and come to the visits with questions, right? And I also want to say that there's this stigma in the Black community, especially for women, that we have to be strong all the time. And I even present as this strong, and I am this strong woman that just doesn't struggle with depression, right? I'm not sad. I'm very bubbly and I'm excitable, and I laugh a lot and I laugh very loudly. But that was something to pay attention to, because I was not myself, right? And while I faced several instances of adversity and I triumphed in the past, this one I really needed some help with.
Adrienne, I'm going to go to you on this last question. What's your advice for moms who are experiencing mental health issues, and what resources would you recommend them look at?
Right. So the first thing is that, again, this is very, very common. It is nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, I experienced postpartum depression almost 20 years ago when my son was born, and it really fundamentally rocked my world. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where to reach out for help. We have so many more resources. This issue is being talked about so much more. Still not enough. And so again, if you're not feeling well, if you're not feeling like yourself, there are resources. And the first one is the National Maternal Mental Health Hotline. That has been in operation for over 2 years and has helped almost 35,000 families already. And that number is 1-833-TLC-MAMA. And it offers English, voice and text support in both English and Spanish. It's 24/7. And it's a great place to start. And those hotline counselors then can connect you with local resources like Postpartum Support Virginia, where Kamisha is in Virginia. And there are organizations like Postpartum Support Virginia now in existence in many of the states. And our website, Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance, also has lists of resources. And so there is help that is available. Start with your obstetric provider, your family practice provider, your pediatrician. Those folks should be able to point you in the right direction for getting help.
Well, Kamisha, Battle Jackson, and Adrienne Griffin, thank you so much for your time today. We don't talk about this issue enough, so I'm so glad that you both have offered your insight and your wisdom that our viewers can definitely check out. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
That's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Julia Manchester. Come back next week.